Hello and welcome to another episode of Compliance Therapy with Igor Volovich, sponsored by Qmulos. And joining us today is Heidi Saas, an attorney and a legal mind of great caliber, and we love having her on. So thanks for making the time. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Heidi Saas. I'm a data privacy and technology attorney. I'm licensed in New York, Connecticut, and Maryland. I also hold the CIPP US certification from the IAPP. These are my opinions, not legal advice.
Thank you so much for joining us. So the topic that's making the news right now is the False Claims Act being applied to the Penn State case. So apparently Penn State had made some misrepresentations about their compliance posture with respect to some defense information. And since, of course, Penn State is a government research facility, they do take federal grants. They're definitely within scope of federal law when it comes to these kinds of things. And so now they're being pursued since I believe October is when the case was filed, and now it's finally made the news. So the relator or the whistleblower who brought the case to light was their former CIO for the research lab that was actually within scope of this misrepresentation, a series of misrepresentations. So it's making the news. It's kind of a new development. I think a lot of folks are surprised to see the False Claims Act being applied that way. I think it follows also a recent kind of a different climate that's been emerging around the enforcement of cyber and civil fraud, right, on the civil fraud initiative. And so I'd love to talk to you about that. I'd love to hear your opinion as a legal scholar, as an expert in this field, to help us understand what it means, what that portends for the leadership within these organizations, and kind of get people to wake up to understanding what False Claims Act can actually, how it can threaten them and what it can bring to bear on their environments.
Sure. Well, I don't practice Keaton cases, but I do, when I come across a situation, I rely upon their expertise, route people to them for questions and advice, because it's a pretty particular practice area of the law. What I do is I work in ethics, and so there's overlap there. People are looking for someone they can talk to that has the same ethics that they do. So, people will come and talk to me about these issues. Likewise, when I'm talking to businesses, I use that ethical foundation so that I can help them build their strategy moving forward. I don't want to build for what we need. I want to build for where we're going, because there's a lot more value to invest your money this way. So the False Claim Act, it dates back to 1863. It's not new. And if you think about what was happening in our country at that time, there was a lot of concern about, federal dollars being spent in military context and that money disappearing. So they passed this law, which we are now using, and Justice has decided to expand it with the initiative to say this is now for cybersecurity issues as well, because the last thing we need in terms of national defense interests is sloppy cybersecurity on our side, because people are ticking boxes and they don't, affect the changes that the box has on it to the back end of the system. And that's just sloppy. We cannot, as a nation, build the infrastructure that we want to do the things that we need and protect ourselves with sloppy compliance work. So that's why Justice said, you know what, it is within our interest to expand these causes of actions and to include these so that this initiative can move forward. Working in the field as a lawyer, when I ask questions, I usually get an answer from somebody, and pretty quick. As a consultant, not so much. And this is, working in smaller organizations, larger organizations, they don't necessarily feel like they need to give me an answer, or they don't want to give me an answer, or they don't know the answer, and they don't want to tell me they don't know the answer. And so talking to other professionals in the field and the privacy side of compliance, because privacy is what you want, but cyber is how you get it. So, these teams always need to work together. But in talking to these people, they agree with me. There's a lot of frustration in the paperwork exercises that is called compliance. And they're also fed up with having to be a part of a machine that is just churning paper. When they know enough to make the changes to the system, they want to see these changes made. They know it's the right thing to do, but they keep running into obstacles. So in that instance, those people are looking for somewhere else to go to find out, what else can I do to bring about the right change for my company? Honestly, I think whistleblowers exist because of shitty middle management. That's exactly why you have whistleblowers. If people would listen to their employees when they say, I have concerns about this issue, and they would take that to heart and do something with it and document it properly instead of falsifying records, then businesses would be able to run better. Companies are not just a building, with assets. Companies are made up of humans. And the humans are getting sick of carrying water if it is going to endanger them. This is a way for them to say, I told you you need to make change and you didn't listen to me. It's a very extreme position. In this guy's case, the relator for the government, it was a very extreme position. It was absolutely ridiculous. They didn't even have a security plan at all. So how are they supposed to, certify all of the grants and the cyber requirements under NIST if they didn't even have a plan? And this was going on for years. So imagine how many different grant applications went through. The government gave them a grant for $2.1 billion. Yeah, from NASA and the Navy to build like rockets and bombs and who knows what they're building. And they put it on Microsoft 365 commercial grade, absolutely inappropriate. So, I mean, exactly. And they're thinking it'll be fine. Well, it's not fine now. So I just want to read to you real quick from the prayer for relief. The last section here, it says, due to defendant's conduct, the United States government has suffered substantial monetary damages and is entitled to recover treble damages. That's 3 times. And a civil penalty for each false claim, record, or statement. And then also pay this guy because he brought it forward and he did the work for us. 2 Tiger teams were involved. On the second one, they came in and it just fell apart because of all the stuff they kept finding, and he kept bringing it up. And the managers over there that, they're under the bus now for sure. But the whole program has to be rebuilt to fill in the gaps that he identified, because this was just unsealed recently. So, those problems are still there. They cannot rebuild the infrastructure fast enough, right? I hope as soon as they got sued, I hope they immediately put a blitz of IT people in there to start patching and fixing all of the problems that they have. Because if they've done nothing but hope they could fight it in court, these problems still exist.
Well, that's absolutely true, and I really appreciate that overview. So, I've been in ethics functions. I've protected whistleblowers myself, and to your point, I think whistleblowers serve as kind of the safety valve, right? When the system builds up too much pressure of malfeasance, of non-compliance, of negligence, of just illegality sometimes, right? Just plain old illegality, right? That's when that safety valve is supposed to blow, right? And then that's when they blow the whistle. And so, there are folks who regard whistleblowers as kind of traitors. How could you possibly go out there and, tell tales about our company and, you've got insider knowledge? Well, the problem is cybersecurity is so complex. And cybersecurity compliance is even more complex because it's got that blend of regulatory and legal and and technical, right? And so all of that blends together. It becomes a very difficult soup to kind of sort out and sift through. You have to be an insider. I mean, it's very difficult for an outside auditor or an outside assessor or an outside regulator to come in and have enough knowledge. I mean, look, I'm still a certified auditor. I've been in those roles where you walk in, you've got 2-3 weeks with a company, maybe a month. You're relying on them to tell you things. You're trying to interpret them. You're trying to also at the same time validate if what they're telling you is the truth, and not necessarily to say that this is, they're being malicious, right? They're lying to you on purpose. They may not even know. And I think you made that point also. They may not themselves know what they're telling you. They believe that they know about the state of their controls, and they may not, right? Or maybe they're being pressured to misrepresent, and you would not know that, right? So a good auditor, of course, would go and discover that. But look, I think a lot of the audit and compliance, that whole industry that's developed over the last few decades, it hasn't really done much in terms of actual security posture. Look, we spend billions on compliance. Some companies spend upwards of 60% of their security program on compliance costs and overhead. It's highly manual. It's very reactive. It's very retroactive. It looks always backwards. I mean, look, let's go back even further. You talked about the origins of the False Claims Act going back to the 1860s. The way we've done compliance hasn't changed since the days of Hammurabi. Think about that, right? The thing we all learn, the first business law class we ever take, that's the first law that's ever written, the Code of Hammurabi. The building codes, that's what people always refer to, right? Build a bad building and somebody dies and they're going to collapse the building onto you. Retribution, attribution, very public, and it's supposed to deter, right? So it's this deterrence model built through attribution or attribution. It's hard to do in cyber. Things move too fast. It's very hard to know who actually is responsible. So behind this complexity, folks have been hiding for a long time. They've been kind of, saying, well, this is too complex. I don't understand. That control was faulty and we didn't get to it till a year from then. And in the meantime, the bad guys exploited that bad control and whoops, sorry, it's just too complex. We operate on the annual cadence. We had our external auditors come in. They took a look. They're not looking at everything. I mean, the little secret that nobody likes to talk about in audit and compliance is audit requires sampling. You're not looking at every control. You're walking in and you say, look, I've got 2,000 line of business applications. Do you really think we're going to look at those in 3 weeks? No, we're going to take a sample. We're going to make sure that it's more or less, quote unquote, representative. And then we'll just kind of try to extrapolate, have a proxy understanding of what else is happening across the company. We're trying to take a temperature in like 3, 4, 5 pieces, places in the pool, but we're not sifting through the whole pool. We're not telling you exactly where things are. So it's kind of this, parts per million of bacteria, it's good enough, right? Those are the kinds of statistical measurements we're trying to make. But the problem is it doesn't work that way. The bad guys don't look at statistics and they don't look at compliance reports. They're finding that one path in and then they exploit from there. And so, yes, we're not saying we can ever get to perfect security, but the audit model is broken. And it's broken because compliance always looks backwards. We haven't changed that, right? And I think that to me is one of the fundamental issues with all of this is that we use these models to make assessments to gain an understanding in hopes of having some kind of visibility to actual risk posture of these environments. And when it comes to national defense, we're talking about lives. We're talking about missions, important national security missions, defense missions. And when you engage industry partners and research community partners, you trust them to protect that information. And that's where programs like CMMC and Estate 171 come in, and FISMA, et cetera, right? But if all we're doing is checking the box and throwing paper at it, we're not being meaningful about it, right? And I think the problem is we've set this up in a way where you can actually keep doing these paper exercises and still be called good enough. Right? I mean, that's the way it's been happening.
Yeah, well, that and to get the attention, you have to have a whistleblower case like this, or, a big regulatory action or something like that, because they've got to get the big fish, and that's, so everybody else is hiding in the herd, hoping they're not going to get hit. But it's dangerous with cyber because the hackers only need to be right once. So, and speaking of the hackers being right once and all of this NASA and Navy defense data being on the commercial grade version of Microsoft, what about Microsoft and the massive breaks, right? So, I mean, not only should we worry about, the controls and compliance, but what in fact is happening to this data that you were supposed to protect? Because now it's, who's got it? The CCP? I don't know who's got it. I bet Microsoft can't tell who's got it. I mean, this is a huge problem, right? Because vendor selection is important. And this was just laziness. It's not like they had a lack of money. They could have bought whatever vendor they wanted to. They said financial concerns, so we don't want to use Box or whatever. And so we're going to move on and use, Microsoft, but the commercial version. So that matters because of ad tech and data collection and privacy rights. Yeah, so the same thing that you have going on in there is that, yes, these are the policies and procedures for the cyber controls, but the back end of the system is not configured that way. Just like in privacy, I click no to your cookies and I look at the back end and you're tracking everything. So, I mean, it's exactly the same thing, because that's how the infrastructure was built. So until people make radical shifts in how they're building the infrastructure, we're going to continue to have the same issues. And I think part of this is because we're just now starting to recognize the harms from privacy violations. We long known about the harms from cyber violations, but now we can see the connection between the two. What happens when your data gets hacked? It's sold on the dark web. What happens then? Identity theft. Hello, that's a nasty feedback loop, okay? So how do we fix this? The systems need to change, individuals need more right in their data, and we need transparency and accountability in both cyber and in privacy. Why do I say transparency and accountability? Everybody says transparency and accountability. Why do I say it? Because it means to me, I want to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and who I'm coming for when I see something I don't like. That is what transparency and accountability means to me. It is minutes before the developers are going to be held responsible for coding some of these issues in. Exactly. The CISO is going down. Everybody but the CEO is going to get in trouble for this sort of thing.
Well, that's a very good point, right? I think the folks that are listening need to understand, and I'm really hoping that the CISOs, the CTOs, the CIOs, and maybe some of the lawyers that are listening to this, that they understand that the time of plausible deniability is over. That era is gone. The transparency that's been denied in the past, the transparency is coming, right? And
Complexity is coming for a lot of things, discrimination, all kinds of things. You just say it's complex and people are like, oh, I just can't look into it. That means don't ask me any more questions when they say it's complex. To me, that's an invitation to light you up because you're hiding something.
Absolutely. And, and so again, that complexity, it's being dispelled, right? Because the government is basically saying, look, we've had enough. We've been trusting you with this data. We've been giving you a lot of rope, and you've kind of been playing hooky. I mean, we've depended on you. And of course, yes, I mean, like we said, the compliance models have been kind of broken. They remain structurally ineffective. And I think demanding that compliance move into the real time, kind of like we did with, M2131. There's a good example, right? When the executive order 14028 came out, when we had all those breaches back into, 2020, 2021, the EO comes out and then it spawns all these different children, M2131, that's the logging memorandum. Then you've got M2209, which is zero trust, and many, many others. But those are the primary two that we talk about, certainly the public sector space. The move towards real-time awareness, real-time monitoring of controls, continuous control monitoring, as we call it. That is something that is absolutely necessary because you want to have compliance move into real time. You want it to operate on the same time scale as security operations. We would never expect to do security with data from 3 months ago or even 3 days ago, right? We want real time now, right? Milliseconds is what we fight for. And yet in compliance, we accept this kind of retroactive view, this historical perspective. It's like it's become this, we're allowed it to become this historical reporting function with little to no value from a security perspective. So we do compliance over here, full stop, big pause, swivel chair, then we do security. And then somewhere around there, there's this nebulous notion of risk management. And I tell you, I've been to many, many places in my consulting life, in my advisory life, in my audit life. And I can tell you most of the folks consider risk management is this kind of a one-off thing. It's like it sits there, we'll ask people a survey, we'll send out this questionnaire once in a while, maybe once a quarter, and we'll ask people to say, hey, what do you think are your top 5 risks that could torpedo your function? And that's about as far as it goes. Some people try to quantify it. Some people apply, the FAIR model or something. They'll try to actually do this in some kind of quantified manner, but it lacks legitimacy. It lacks credibility. It doesn't have enough meat in there. And I think the reason is, again, because we've had this great model. I mean, look, compliance is complex, but it's also very capable. It's comprehensive. These control statements are very well thought out. I mean, they were developed by, NIST, for crying out loud, right? Scientists, actual computer scientists, right? Hundreds of PhDs, industry. Everyone's been involved in developing these standards and frameworks. They're good standards and frameworks. They represent our understanding of these threat models. If you were to apply them effectively, and of course, this is not to say, hey, let's go out and get every control in NIST 853 and apply that to the maximum. That's not realistic, right? You want to tailor it to your specific environment, but that means once you've done that, how do you maintain that posture? How do you know that those controls are actually remaining effective? And we've relied on compliance management, big air quotes around that, to maintain that awareness, right? But the bad guys are going at you every second of every day, but you're only looking at these controls once every 3 years. I mean, the triennial assessment cadence in the federal space is absolutely normal. You get that triennial ATO, authority to operate, and then you come around every year, you try to certify, you kind of do a little spot check here and there. That just doesn't work, right? And so we got to get past the paper. We got to get to real time. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing, to me personally, when I read through all these cases, when I look at the, Rocketdyne Aerojet, and we can talk about that too. That's another application of the False Claims Act. That's another whistleblower relator, as the prosecutors call them.
That's a good one just to mention real quick that they said we're going to give you like $10-15 million. And they gave him less than 4. I'd be mad too.
Right. Yeah.
Dude, I mean, that was the CFO.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a security director, and look, sometimes those numbers don't come together. But look, we have the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, which is supposed to incentivize exactly these kinds of whistleblowers, right? They've set aside actually the fines that they collect
You eat
fund
what you
program.
kill. Yeah, you eat what you kill. Whistleblower is actually good for, it's bipartisan support because it doesn't take appropriation money from Congress.
Exactly.
Because you do eat what you kill. The problem is the business community and the Chamber of Commerce and, all the big tech companies are like, oh, this is killing us. The rapacious lawsuits and the runaway plaintiffs bar and this and that. When actually this is just the shift back. Like you said, people have had it with, checking the boxes and being frustrated. So this is the pushback. And businesses need to be listening to that. So when it comes to compliance and risk management, risk management is basically what's on your lawyer's calendar, because that's how they're managing the risk. If they're putting their time on it, you got a risk and they're doing what they can about it. Other than that, you're not managing your risk, right? So
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, what are they working on? And do they even know what everybody else is working on? Because I mean, that's kind of a problem, because if you have problems in compliance and you want to take it to counsel and counsel doesn't want to hear about it, that's reason for pause. Yeah, and
well, that's a reason to hit the button and maybe blow the whistle, and that's what a lot of folks' frustration is driving them to do, because they've been talking about this. They found themselves in these functions where at some point they wake up and realize, look, I'm not just a guy checking the box. I'm not just a gal signing up on these controls. I'm carrying the responsibility on my shoulders. It's my name on the line, and when my pen hovers over that dotted line when I'm about to sign off and certify these controls, it should give you a lot of pause. And I think a lot of folks are now starting to wake up to that. And I certainly hope forums like these and conversations like these bring more awareness to that, because frankly, you don't know what you're signing off on. You have no idea. And if you're relying on just these manually based compliance efforts, or you're relying, God forbid, on your external auditor to kind of give you this, the sort of the CYA kind of cover, they're not going to give you air cover. I mean, we've talked to pretty much everybody in the Big Four community. They're worried about this too. They're worried about the long tail liability on this. They're worried about things that they did 5 years ago coming back to bite them now, because we know dwell times on some of these, complex cyber attacks can be significant. It could be years before you discover somebody's burned their way into your environment and siphoned data off. And so something that you may have certified 2-3 years ago on the last audit is now coming back to bite you. And now your reputation is on the line. Now, look, we know that the KPMG, the EY, the Deloitte, all those folks, they live and die by their reputation. They can't afford this. And so now there's a serious conversation happening with that community as well. And I think it should. It's long overdue. So they're waking up to this. I think the attorneys are waking up to it. The CIOs and the CISOs, they need to understand they're in the line of fire. It's their butt on the line. And if they cannot have compliance confidence, which is something that I've been promoting as an idea, what is your compliance confidence? Can you even have compliance confidence in the current model? And I think the answer should be a resounding no. If you're honest with yourself and you're not just trying to check a box and kind of get past the compliance requirement on a contract, get that business or get that federal grant, right? Just you're passing the gate. That's all you're doing. We're just passing the gate so we can get that money, get that business, get that PO executed. If that's the mentality, if that's all you're thinking about, getting, compliant is just an exercise in getting that paper, you got to be out to lunch pretty quick.
Yeah, well, there are going to be problems for you later on, for a couple of reasons for how data is currently being processed and how it's going to have to change for being processed. But I just want to put in a disclaimer here. If you feel like you need to blow the whistle, please wait and tell no one and go find a whistleblower attorney and talk to them, because these are very delicate cases. They have to be filed under sealed. You have to have things prepared. You have to be prepared to ruin your life. Because once you blow the whistle, you can't go back. And so it's dangerous work, absolutely. But if you feel like you have no other option, don't do anything yet until you can talk to an attorney who regularly does this work, and they can shepherd you through the process and advise you, here are your options, here are some things to think about, so that you can make a decision, because you may just need to change your job and go work somewhere else. Then that might need to be what you do. But if you are constantly changing firms to work somewhere else and keep running into the same issue, maybe you should also consider working for the government, because we are hiring technologists to work with our regulators, because that is what's leveling the playing field effectively right now. So, these cases are just, one other way that we're trying to bring fairness back to the economy, and also to try to make sure that we build the systems that we're going to be able to trust. Because right now, I don't trust our systems because we lack the rights in our data, we lack the thoroughness and the institutions and the infrastructures for most of the people operating with a lot of our data now, because you can have 99.9% compliance, but the hacker only needs that, percentage to get in and to ruin everything. They took down the casino in 10 minutes on the phone, right? On the phone. Hey, I saw LinkedIn, I'm so-and-so. And they're like, yep, so-and-so works here. Here are the keys, turn out the lights when you leave. He was like, sure, roger that. So, I mean, these are things that you can try to train people for, and, you can have the best compliance system available, on paper, but if you haven't implemented those changes and trained your people on what you really need to do, first computer is still the best. Are you really going to get the results that you need? So yes, the system says this and my training says that, but if it still doesn't sit right with you, you need to get more answers to your questions. You don't need to be frustrated and live in fear. That's no way for anybody to live while they're doing this work. Unhappy developers write awful code.
That is true, right? And I think too. I love the whole Las Vegas story. I mean, I hate that it happened, but I hate to even call it a cyber attack. Somebody asked me recently.
So stupid. Like, how is that even a cyber attack? That's so stupid. My kid can do this.
I mean, to me, it's like I like thinking about things like first mile, right? What was the first hop? Like, how did they get in? What was the initial vector of compromise? And yes, unfortunately, for most of it, it happens to be social engineering. Folks are susceptible. The people are the weakest link. I hate saying that because we've been saying that cliche for the last 25 years, but it's true, right? But here's the thing: you can throw all the training, all the security awareness training at your people, but ultimately, you gotta have it's a multivariate problem, right? This is not just one control, one thing, and that's it.
Layers.
Right? After exactly, right? And it's not, because we don't have a classic perimeter based model anymore. There is no, you breach the perimeter and you go in and you go in and you go in and you burrow deeply. We're all over the place. It's cloud, it's hybrid, stuff on prem. People are all over the place. We don't have them sitting in the same building anymore. It's it's become a much more difficult problem to solve, and the controls kind of have to travel with the data and they have to travel with the people. So it's no more create this hard shell around this thing and then inside it can be kind of chewy and soft. Everything has to be hard. You have to microsegment. You have to get the controls down to a single endpoint, single user, single piece of data. Hard to do. We do have the technology for it. But again, this is not a technology problem. A lot of people tend to think that this is a technology problem. If we only had more technology, better technology, more advanced technology, and more money to spend on it and get the people to manage it. Look, we've got 3.2 million jobs that are unfilled in cyber already, right? You think it's going to get better? You think the college is magically going to start spitting out folks who are professional? Or even if we go to the vocational training model.
No, they keep going to work in ad tech. I can't get them to stop this. They want to go and be like a rock star working in ad tech. Like, I don't know whoever made that cool, but they should stop because that's a scam too. So, I mean, do you want that to be your testament in life? This is what I did, like this is what you did to improve the world. You made, capitalism and surveillance like the best ever. No, stop wasting brain power with this. We need people invested in doing other things. And I think ethics is the key. The younger generations, they have more of the ethics. They're sick of the status quo. The return of truth and justice, don't call it a comeback. They've always been here. But the return of truth and justice, it is giving me a lot more hope these days. Right. So I'm excited to see what we're seeing with the changes that are coming. But I am here to tell you there are a lot more changes to come. So, the regulatory changes that are coming with respect to the data, a lot of data is going to have to be retagged. A lot of new systems are going to have to be set up because some of the changes are going to include a right of deletion that is permanent. How do you implement this into your system, right? At the same time, you're dealing with all kinds of new and interesting threats, like generative AI-assisted polymorphic malware. How do you even find that stuff? We've got random API.
There's a mouthful.
GPT, you might want to put in some captchas, like basic safety rails. These kinds of conversations, it's not just cool stuff you see in the news and things that you doodle with pictures of your dog. Like, this is important kind of stuff that is going to impact what we're doing and how our systems operate. People aren't thinking that far enough ahead.
Well, speaking of doodles, I don't know if you saw, ChatGPT just released the new vision feature to the pro users, and I've been following the threads and on X this morning, and people are literally able to show it a picture of a dashboard, and it will write code to make that dashboard possible. I mean, you could show it a
Oh my
comic.
God, the hackers must be so excited.
Absolutely,
Oh
right?
my God, this
It's
is
lowering the barrier
amazing for
to entry
them.
so much, right? When we saw ransomware as a service, and I was involved in one of the earliest botnet task force efforts back 20 years ago when I was at Microsoft. And we worked with the international law enforcement, we worked through Interpol, we worked with the FBI, the Secret Service, to try to combat the commercialization of malware. And really understanding malware as a business and understanding that it's not just a nuisance, that it actually is an organized crime.
Now you just use Google Ads for that. So
Right. So the notion that there's an economy built around it, right? And once we started seeing things as a service, basically crimeware as a service, and now and that lowered the barrier to entry. I mean, we saw a grandma in Minsk, Belarus, managing a 20-person crew of kids. And she wasn't even a hacker. She didn't even know how to write code.
they got
She was
HR
just kind of like den
departments, they
mother.
got paid time off, like they got Slack channels where they complain about their bosses.
Absolutely, right. So that lowered barrier to entry, I think that's the theme. And so we're seeing more and more people coming into this. And with ChatGPT and other generative AI type capabilities, yeah, more people are coming into the fray. And we are facing an asymmetric threat that we're not prepared for. We don't have the resources. And so you have to rely on smart automation. You have to gain visibility to your controls in real time. Otherwise, you're just playing whack-a-mole. You keep throwing technology at the wall, hoping something sticks. The vendors are very, very happy to sell you the latest and the greatest, right? We've got, look, Rich Steenan at IT Harvest tracks about 4,200, I think, right now, active cybersecurity vendors. And you can ask a question, is that enough or too many or not enough or what is it, right? But when you go down to Black Hat, you go down to RSA Security Conference, and you talk to these vendors and you see these floors full of, the exhibition floors, you've got 50, 60 vendors in the same category. I mean, yes, diversity is great when it comes to different products, and it's good to have multiple perspectives. But a lot of them are not companies, they're features. They're not solutions. They're just ideas. And sometimes, it's not, they're not really solving anything. The only problem they're solving is, well, the only problem they're solving is not enough yachts for the private equity and VC crowds, right? And that's a problem, I guess, that needs to be solved at some degree, right? And capitalism is great. But I think the market is certainly overwhelmed. There's too much I think there's too much technology and not enough context for that technology, right? A lot of folks look at technology, they don't necessarily see it as a solution. They hope it's a solution, right? And then when they look at a solution, they don't understand it within the context of a specific threat or category or capability category, right? The context is what matters. And to me, and going back to compliance, that is a wonderful context to have because you already have everything defined in there. You have things like, system integrity controls, perfect example, right? Where controls do travel with the system. And you can certify the system to have those controls in place. Now, if you do as a point in time assessment and then you walk away for the next 2 years, that's useless. I don't care how advanced it is. I don't know how comprehensive it is, how honest you are in that assessment. You can be completely honest, truthful, transparent, credible. But once you walk away, that gap in time, that's when the bad things happen. That control could be falling out of place literally the next minute. You wouldn't know about it till the next audit suite came around, the next assessment suite. So
Twitter's a good example to look at on those points right there that you brought up. Twitter's great because when Elon got there to protect free speech, he immediately let go all the people working on like safety and all kinds of technologists and people that were necessary. And they left and they were gone. And it was like within days, things were falling apart. And the engineers were like, that's because everything is band-aided together. And if you're not there to manually fix whatever wheel's not turning, everything's going to fall apart. And it sure did. They had to redo a lot of things on the fly and rehire some people and say, I'm sorry, pretty quick, because they realized that it is not a technology company. It's also a company made up of people that make that technology work for better or for worse. But like that's a problem. Some of the changes that are coming in terms of data is the classifications of data, the way that data is being used right now. Yes, it needs to be secured, but why do you still have that data? Data retention schedules are something that I really want to look at with people, and when I'm reviewing a data pipeline to find out where you're getting this and what are you doing with it, why you still got that. I don't care that you have, why, triple hash it. I don't care, but just get rid of it because you don't need it. You don't need to spend the money on the server to maintain the data that you're not using. Somebody lied to you and said the guy with the most data wins. That needs to stop. So a lot of the cybersecurity work that you're challenged with, legacy data is one of your biggest issues. And so that's where people on my side of compliance need to get more into the business of elbows to let them know this is increasing your risk on the cyber side as well. Why are you not getting rid of your data according to your data retention schedule? Because that, if you did that, you would lower the risk, you would reduce the cost. There's so many benefits to this. People aren't used to hearing ways to make money doing compliance, but I got a lot of them. So, these are the kinds of things that people need to work at, because the privacy team, the cyber team, the legal team, and the marketing team, like they don't often talk until someone comes in to do an audit and then has to do interviews with each person, and you get like a half hour with each one to find out what's going on. And some of that's useful, but if there were more of a team aspect to doing these kind of regular audits so that you could get diverse inputs from the different areas that are using the data, then it's going to help you design a better plan, because maybe you don't need to lock down all of your data as level 1 security. Maybe you only need to reduce access to only these people for this amount of time. Those sorts of controls and things that you can do, that increases productivity. It may even increase, I've had it situations where we created brand new revenue streams that didn't exist before, because you finally had a trustworthy privacy ecosystem within which you could do cool things with your data. You don't just want to collect the data, you're supposed to be doing stuff with it. So whoever says they're a data-driven business and their lake house is a mess, you can't even find my data, you're full of it. So, I don't have patience for that kind of corporate speak, especially on, from the vendors and the people on the enterprise side, because they're just saying things that they've heard somewhere else that sound like it's complex, so you won't ask any questions, and then they just walk away thinking, gosh, I'm so clever. So, I'm the first person who's going to go look in the backside and be like, you said this in your policy. I'm looking at the backside and you're full of it over there too. So who needs to light you up? Do I need to send you a scary letter? Do I need to, blast you on LinkedIn? Like, what kinds of things can we do to increase the pace of what we're doing? These, False Claim Act cases, that's one, research projects that are shining a light on sloppy AI and other sorts of things on huge global scale businesses. That's another way to bring attention to how easily this can all fall apart. But I think it comes back down to how we're using the data. These systems were all built to process human data without any respect for human dignity. And you can't add that back as an afterthought. And that's the most challenging, most expensive part now. But it had to be expensive for them, or they won't make the changes. Pretty soon, to use these systems, your data, the people are going to have a right to know what you have, the right to correct it, the right to opt out of mass marketing, and a private right of action to sue you if you don't in certain areas of the law. Those areas in the Fair Credit Reporting Act are housing, employment, lending, insurance, and education. All of the data related to those areas are going to have a private right of action attached to them. So how are you going to have to reclassify all of those types of data moving through your business's systems moving forward? That's right. That face right there. I want more people to make that face, because this is coming. Early adopters are not looking for the opportunity to say, I told you so. We're waiting for people to say, I hear you now. What do we do?
Absolutely. Well, look, I think what you described there, the synergy, the need to cooperate between legal, compliance, risk, security, operations, IT, business, the business itself, right? That's what I refer to as compliance strategy. And in fact, that is my function. That is my title, VP of Compliance Strategy. And people always ask me, what's there to strategize? It's compliance. Just, do the compliance and then that's it. No, because compliance can be proactive. And if you look, compliance to me, it sounds like I see it as lingua franca of the business, right? You can talk legal, IT, risk, security, compliance. You can talk about it because the regulation is there, the framework is there, the controls are there. You don't have to talk about technology. You as a legal person, you as a risk person, don't have to know about that firewall rule, right? You don't have to understand it. You have to be able to read it. It's unrealistic for me to expect of you in the chief counsel's office or in the chief privacy officer's office to know enough about that. I'm not going to go in. I mean, if I know what I'm doing as a CISO, I should not be going to these meetings and talking about firewall rules and intrusion detection systems and ransomware controls, etc. Nobody cares. You don't have time for that. You don't have the bandwidth for that. And I'm walking in there and geeking out on the tech. and I'm losing my credibility. And we've had this problem since the beginning of security, since the beginning of cyber, since the first CISO ever walked into an office and called himself a CISO, right? So compliance is the way. That is the way, that's the nexus. That is the one medium in which we can all operate. And if we can only realize that that is its value, that it's not just
that's our language right there. If we
that
all
is
get
our legal
to
front,
talk
right?
about that, you can identify where are the ethical choices, who needs to make that ethical choice, what are the next steps to do here, and in getting that buy-in from all the stakeholders who are using your data. I mean, honestly, I think in most businesses, the two departments doing the shadiest things with your data are marketing and HR.
Can be, yeah. They can be. I mean, and
Yeah,
look,
but I want to hear from them. I want you to be able to accomplish what you're doing. Maybe not like that, but I want to hear what it is that you're doing. So maybe we can find a better way to help you do what it is that you're trying to do so that it can be a little bit more secure, a little bit more privacy respecting, a little bit less creepy, whatever it is that you're trying to do here. Also, employee data, that's a whole other thing. What if you have somebody who has, like God access within your system, and they're going in, a system administrator, and they're making all kinds of changes, and then they leave. They're a former employee, and they come back and say, delete all my data. I'm a former employee and I want you to delete it. Who owns that data? I posed this question to the FTC and the CFPB in the comments that I made when working with regulators is, who owns this data? Is it the business? Is it the employee who has rights to it? Is it even functionally possible to do what they're asking you to do? And how close can you get to affording them their right to not be involved there anymore, but also maintaining functionality of the system that they're building? Right? Those are big questions that people need to think about before they start writing decisions. And please don't start writing laws to regulate AI yet, because people still don't know what it is. So that's exactly. But DFARS is going to be updated soon to include coverage for generative AI. I mean, imagine how many shockwaves that's going to send through a lot of different organizations. Right? Like, and they need to, at least on the procurement side, you need to do better vendor research. And, it's all you have is like a promise of magic when it comes to generative AI, and then a lot of compute power backed by one of the entrenched chosen winners. So I mean, exactly. So it reminds me of the magical egress. Did you hear that story? You're at the carnival and there's a big sign, come and see the magical egress. You won't believe your eyes. You pay your money, you go inside. Everybody's telling you, you're not going to believe it. The magical egress. You've never seen anything like it. Big door, it says magical egress. You go outside, it locks behind you because egress means exit. And then you got took.
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of folks are flocking to generative AI. They're seeing the cool trend, and they're saying, I mean, God, you can't go on any social media platform without being hit by 15 things in 2 minutes. Learn about generative AI. This is how you can make money with generative AI. This is the best thing ever since sliced bread. If you're not making money in AI, then you're stupid. All that.
Yeah, but how's that going to comply with NIST and DFAR? And I mean, because that's coming.
That's the real world, right?
Yeah, if they make those rules, you're going to have to comply with that. And if you don't, you're going to have more whistleblowers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's the ad tech world, there's the TikTok world, and there's the Instagram world, and then there's the real world that we operate in, which is the world of DFARS and CMMC compliance, and when they state 171 and CUI, and defense information and classified information. That's the world we operate in. That's the world our company operates in. So to us, all that stuff is kind of there. We kind of see it, but what we focus on is protecting the enterprise, protecting national defense data, protecting intelligence community data. That's the reality of where we live. And so when we think about things like, well, the False Claims Act, it's hard to apply to something like TikTok, right? We can certainly apply other things to it, but for what we've seen, I mean, the emerging, and I mean, it's already here. It's not emerging; it's here. The enforcement climate has changed. It'll never go back. I hope it'll never go back. I think the fire needs to be lit under a lot of butts, and it hasn't been. And I think the Aerodyne Rocketjet case, or Aerojet Rocketdyne, I always get that wrong. Aerojet Rocketdyne, the Penn State case, and I think there'll be a few others. Probably, hey, who knows? Maybe they're already filed and they're under seal right now. So probably in the next 3-4 months.
I recently there's a woman because these last two were men. There's a woman, and yeah, I need to go back and look because I flagged that article too. But her expected recovery is about $70 million.
Wow.
For bringing this
serious
claim.
Look, the civil cyber fraud.
Well, okay, so if that is her portion of the earnings for bringing this claim, imagine how many tax dollars we were defrauded of.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
and the thing is, it's always been like this weird. I mean, I've had conversations with folks in certain organizations where they go, you try to do a threat model, at least like at a very notional macro level, and you say, okay, well, we're looking at about, 50, 60, $100 million loss in revenue. And they go, well, you see, our revenue is not lost. It's only deferred because there's nowhere else you can go. And you go, okay, so at least, okay, let's assume your premise, which I don't agree with. Let's say we assume, fine. So you push that number to the next quarter. It's deferred, fine. Or you stretch it over the next 2 quarters. But look what happened at Clorox. They just got hit, ransomware, again, as always, and they actually couldn't ship product. Like this effect, like the trucks didn't go. The Clorox, the bleach didn't roll off the production line. And so their suppliers didn't get it. They couldn't sell it. And their stock suffered about a $300 million dip. So that's real. And I don't know how you avoid a shareholder derivative lawsuit at this point, because a bunch of people lost money. And I'm not talking about, Joe Blow, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who lost a little bit of money, because he was day trading and he got stupid. I'm talking about a pension fund, that lost, maybe 10% of its value, right? And maybe it'll recover, maybe it won't. But like, this is ransomware, and we're talking about 9-figure losses, not theoretical. No longer, well, it's a reputational loss. Let's look at the, the balance.
The fear mongers, the enterprise counsel are always telling their clients, the average cost of a data breach is like $4 million.
Right.
So we really need
No, it's not.
Well, yeah, no,
It's
it
real
absolutely is not. Yeah, absolutely that is not. No, that is what, you're going to charge them because they screwed up by following your gap-filled advice. So I don't have a lot of faith in enterprise counsel when it comes to the privacy arena. There may be a little bit more trust to be had in the cyber arena because that's.
I don't think so. Because here's the thing. They're still basing their knowledge and their advice on stale data.
What they're told. Yeah.
Well, it's not, and it's exactly. And here's the thing. I use this term opinion farming at scale. Most compliance programs are that. You're asking somebody who owns the system to tell you. They also
work like 60 hours a week, having to, bill out the time and to, fill the garbage.
That's the other piece, right?
Yeah, the void of garbage in our lives. They have to keep churning all of that stuff out and charge.
A lot of business models are built around that, right?
It's the wait and see model. What you just wait and I'll keep charging you, and then you'll see how much I charge you if I ever have to do anything.
And then you infer that means we're making you more secure.
But like you said, you're deferring that and deferring that and deferring that. Like that's a terrible idea on, how to build the infrastructure that you need to rely upon. Like, why would you want to keep listening for that expensive advice if it's also not doing anything for you, but giving you a false sense of security?
Bingo. And I mean, why listen to advice or opinion when you can listen to your data, which you already have? And if you were only using your compliance program in a way that told you the truth, creating inherent resilience in your organization, gave you the compliance confidence, gave you accuracy in your reporting, removed the fear about misrepresenting your controls, like in the Penn State case, like in the Aerojet Rocketdyne case. Who knows what other case will come to life? FTC, SEC, DOJ, CISA, the courts, everybody's coming after these folks, right? And I think people need to wake up. The idea that you can just sort of say, well, it was too complex, I didn't know, but we still certify these controls. Wrong. Go to jail. Don't collect $200, right? This is the coming reality. And I think folks need to wake up to it. They need to realize it. And if just because you're stacking opinions high enough, they don't become facts.
That's
it just doesn't happen.
I'll give you one last parting thought here. I don't care what business you're in. You need at least 2 things to make money: people and data. And if you don't take care of either one, you're done.
And we'll leave with that. Heidi, thank you so much for all the insight. This has been an enormously useful conversation. I think our audience will get a big kick out of it. Your energy is amazing and your insight is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Compliance Therapy with Igor.
Thank you.